Hello. Chances are if you clicked on this video, you are preparing to work in a virtual setting on a group assignment. And chances are you're probably not excited about it. Well, lucky for you, I'm here to help. Working in virtual settings and group settings is becoming all more familiar to us because of this age of the pandemic. But there's no need to be nervous about it, even though navigating it can be quite difficult. So welcome to Working Effectively in a Virtual World. Often, when we're assigned a group project, whether virtual or in person, we have this reaction. Ugh. Oh no, who's going to do the work? Who's going to show up? Are we going to get anything done? Are we going to be productive? It's a lot to consider, and honestly, it can be worse online. But these situations can be okay if we address some major things that we need to have a successful virtual setting. In fact, we can rock the online group setting, and I'm here to help you do that. I'm here to help you go from this reaction to one of this nature. There are lots of things that can help us rock an online group setting and lots of ideas from scholars who have studied and researched this area of communication. But today we're going to focus on three: cultural factors, group climate, and virtual nonverbals and virtual communication are all very important. They're important in all aspects of communication, but they're only heightened when it's a virtual setting. So first, cultural factors and communication. So a lot of times, cultural factors go unaddressed, both face-to-face and in virtual communication settings. We often neglect to address attitudes toward time and technological differences. In attitudes toward time, we often see that not many people feel obligated to show up to their virtual meetings on time or at all. It poses less commitment from the people in the group, which is a disadvantage that it has over face-to-face interactions in which people feel more obligated to show up because their absence will be missed. As for technological differences, not everyone has the same access to technology or internet access that you may have, and this can lead to a lot of difficulty having groups meet and finding a convenient time for groups to meet. In my personal experience, this has been nothing but true. Cultural attitudes towards times and technology has made it difficult for my virtual groups to meet and to schedule meetings and to be productive during said meetings because of the lack of commitment. Timothy Kayworth and Dorothy Liebner agree. They did a study that shows that many people in virtual settings don't feel obligated to show up on time or at all, and that the difficulties connecting to the technology and the differences in the technology often pose for many problems that lead to less productive settings. But they also suggest some ways to combat this. They say that you should establish a meeting program first and foremost, that you should get your group together and all set up the software needed in which you will meet virtually, so that everyone knows exactly what's expected and what you need to do to get onto this software. Second, they suggest keeping a record of the meetings, not just visuals and audio, but also written records that can be either emailed or sent out in some way, shape, or form to members of the group who may have missed the meeting. Second, virtual group climate is often not addressed when it comes to group settings. Some disadvantages of virtual settings that fall on group climate is the lack of accountability and commitment, which again leads to trouble scheduling meetings and even overpowering or undercontributing group members and somewhere in between. In my experience, this has been nothing but true. Because of the lack of face-to-face interaction, my groups have had trouble connecting virtually, and there's been a lack of commitment, and certain people have carried the groups while others have just coasted on the success and ideas of others, which is quite angering. But Judith Holton says that there are ways to work with this and ways to improve group climate. She says that you should open up about group strengths and weaknesses, that you should talk about what you can bring to the table as an individual group member, and maybe in what areas you may struggle as a group member. If time is a disadvantage for you, you can maybe offer to do most of the research behind the scenes and present it in an email form to your group later, before or after the meeting. She also suggests finding a balance that suits everyone's needs. By this, she means not scheduling meetings that not everyone can attend, that the majority of everyone can attend, and also not over or under scheduling. She wants you to find a balance somewhere in between that makes it easy for everyone to join the meeting and for everyone to get the most out of the meeting. So 3 30-minute meetings a day probably isn't the smartest idea. Neither is one 3-hour meeting every couple of days, but somewhere in between, finding a balance that it works for everyone. Finally, it's no surprise that nonverbals are important in communication, both virtually and face-to-face. In fact, Peter F. Drucker says the most important thing in communication is hearing what isn't said, referring to nonverbals. Nonverbals cannot be ignored, even in a virtual setting. And while it's hard to see the advantages of nonverbal virtual communication, there are a few. So here are the advantages and disadvantages of virtual communication when it comes to nonverbals. In a virtual setting, there are camera options in which you can display your face and you can show those nonverbals to your group mates so that they can read and understand what's going on. Another advantage is that you have emojis and other forms of animated expression that you can display on your screen that can do the same. They can help others read the room. However, some quite obvious disadvantages are that people can turn their cameras off, and this is quite counterproductive in that it does not allow for ideas and thoughts to be read as easily. Another disadvantage is that there's difficulty deciphering nonverbals that there wouldn't be in a face-to-face setting, such as internet lagging or this turned off camera. And in a face-to-face setting, you can't quite do that, so it makes for a big disadvantage. But T.K. Kaplan and his colleagues say that while the worst thing you can do is ignore nonverbals, there are some things you can do to make it better. They suggest keeping your camera on at all time and utilizing images and emojis to display nonverbals. These things can help address a group setting and help people read the room and get a vibe for the feelings in the room. In my experience, this has helped quite a bit. When my groups keep our cameras on, we are definitely more productive and get a lot more done and even connect a little bit more as well. So, to recap, some best practices for successful virtual collaboration is to establish a program on which we will meet, keep record of the meetings, written record of the meetings, open up about strengths and weaknesses as a team, find a balance in scheduling meetings, utilize virtual expressions, and keep your cameras on at all times. So as you go into this new virtual world, I hope that you look back on this video and find some tips that will be helpful in navigating virtual communication in a group setting. Thank you.